Alright, so welcome to a new guide on this channel, and on this occasion is the ARGON8 from Modal Electronics. So this is not a review, it's a complete deep dive guide about this device. Now everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. Now if you like this, please like and subscribe, and if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee just to say thanks, you can. Just go to the description. Right, so let's begin. So this guide is going to be pretty much divided on two different parts. This video, I will cover pretty much everything we can do right here, but not the ARP and the sequencer. I will record this on a separate video, and you have the link right there at the top. Now on this synth, you have a lot of features, and understanding navigation on the synth is highly important. If not, you will be wondering where's this and where's that, how can I do this? And you can always do it from the menu. Alright, so in terms of presets, this has 5 different banks with 100 presets each. So you can do 500 total. Pretty much all buttons and all the, all the encoders and everything else, they have 2 different functions, or maybe a secondary, or maybe even a third function. So right here, this button, the one that says patch, will always take you back here to the patch selection screen. And if you're lost, or maybe you did something and you don't know where you are, and you start moving your knobs and you're just lost, pressing the patch will always take you back to the patch selection, which is going to be like your home menu, your home screen. To navigate the presets, you need this button and this button. So notice when I press this is going to be standing on a on top or bottom. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Now you need to stand, when you push it, stand right there at the top. Now when you move this, you're going to be toggling through different screens. We're going to be talking about this. But in terms of patches, if you're standing there and that one is right there selected, you have a line below the number, it means that you're going to be playing that patch. Now if I move this, I go to different patches. Now when I play them, it's not really changing the patches, so what you will need to do is push to load, and it will load the patch number 7 in this case. So this is the way you navigate different patches. Now you have a way of disabling this feature. You can go to settings and disable the push to load. And just when you change the patch, it will, change the path. But this is a cool feature, the push to load, because maybe you did a lot of things right here and you forgot to save it. And if you, by mistake, you move this knob, you're going to be losing all that. So my recommendation is just leave it off, and whenever you need to go to a different patch, you just push to load, and then you are sure that you're loading it. Now notice that when we go through the different presets, we go by ones, right? 22, 33, 6, and so on. And you have 500. So if you need to go to the 450, it's going to be a little bit crazy. You need to scroll. Well, there's a different feature right here. You can go to the shift, and the shift, it's like your best friend on this synthesizer. So you can tap it, and you're going to be latching the shift mode. And when you are on shift, you're going to be enabling a lot of the secondary functions that we have on the knobs and the buttons. In the case of patches, it means with this one that you're going to be changing the bank. And notice that right here below this, it says bank. This means that when shift is on, you're going to be changing the banks. So if I move it, this is going to go to the 100s, 200s, 3, 400s, and so on and so on and so on. You're going to be just toggling between the 5 different banks. Now, you don't need to latch it. You just can press and hold, and while you're holding, you can do the same, and you release it, and there you go. So for now, I'm just gonna go back to the, the first ones, the first bank, and you have a lot of functions. And again, you can do it all from here, but also you can do it from the buttons. That's the cool thing with this synthesizer. Everything, most of things, like 98% of things that you can do them from the panel, and you don't need to menu dive. For example, right here, let's say that I want to initialize a patch. I don't want this one. I want to start creating my a fresh patch. So right here, you have the init. Notice it says init. By just pressing init and holding, press and hold, is going to initialize the patch. All right, so we have a very particular way of navigating the menu. So we know that patch always takes you back home, and right here we have 2 sections. And if you take a look at this button, it says page and it says param. So this means that we have a top page and then a bottom page. Depending on when you are or where you are, by pushing this, we can do different things, or we can go to different places. So for example, if I'm standing on the patch, if I go, back home, we are standing on the patch screen. I go to the one below, and right here we have an action, which is loading a patch. But if I change it to something else, not that one, this one, if I change it to different ones like save patch, we can initialize the patch, randomize the patch, and again, we just can do several functions from here. Now, how can we execute them? Well, we have this button, and then we have to, for example, press to load, and we are going to be saving the patch, but we are executing the function because you're standing at the bottom and you're executing save the patch. Now I'm going to go back home, just back to patch, and you have a lot of different functions right here. Notice that all the functions that you have right here at the bottom, like init patch, then randomize, and maybe save, and then load, we already have them right here. You have the shortcuts. You can save it, for example. Let's say that you're working on a patch and you don't want to go to the page, just go patch, then go right here at the bottom, scroll to find the save, and then do save. You don't need to do that. You have the save right there. You can press and hold, and it's just going to save it for you. And if you want to edit the name by doing just save, it's just going to take you there. And if I go back, notice that we have more options like init patch. We already did this one. If we press and hold, it's going to init the patch. And then if we go to the randomized patch, this is just going to give us a random patch. Now this one is a secondary function within the buttons. Right here it says rand, so we need to go to shift if we want to trigger the rand. If I press and hold, we are going to be doing the init and not the rand. So if I press and hold, it's going to randomize the patch, and we are just going to get a random patch. So in conclusion, all the functions and params that you have right here at the bottom, you already have access through the buttons and through the controls. All right, so now we know that we can go up, we can go down, and when we move this, we are going to be changing the functions that we have at the bottom. Now, what happens if I go to the upper part and I start, shifting this? So you're going to go through the different pages of the synthesizer, and these are the different sections of the synth. The first one is going to be the voices, and right here you can just change all the different types, and this one will change the different params, right? So let's just do whatever. The glide, we have glide, octave, we have all the options right there. Now, so we're right there at the top, it's going to be the page, and at the bottom, it's going to be the param that you're going to be changing. So with this, you just can navigate to the voices. You can go to the oscillator 1, the 2, then all the oscillators, and then the filter. So all of the synthesizer is going to be right here, and you can control it from here. And if you go all the way to the end, you will find notice you have a lot of pages. You will find the configuration for your synthesizer, your MIDI configuration, your UI configuration, which is the LED and the brightness of the of the LEDs. And if you keep going, you have your settings, your general settings. Now, I'm going to go back to patch because it's always back home. And maybe you're thinking, okay, I don't care about this because I'm always going to be using, for example, this one to control the filters. I'm going to be using this. I'm going to use the knobs. I don't care about the menu. Now, sometimes you will need to use the menu to access some functions that you cannot reach within the knobs or the buttons. And sometimes you will need to use it to fine-tune it. For example, if I go right there to the filter, we can go and maybe, do the cutoff like we are doing right now, but we don't see any values. We get nothing, no confirmation, nothing. So by doing one back, move one space back, if I'm standing here, I move back one step, and it's going to take us to the filter menu. So we can go at the bottom, and with this, we can fine-tune the different values instead of just moving it with the knob and not knowing where we are in terms of values. Right, so let's talk about oscillators and algorithms. So in terms of oscillators and wavetables that we have right here on this synthesizer, this is like the main vibe of the synth wavetables, and this is my impression until I started to explore a little bit more. I first said, well, we have 2 oscillators, and on each oscillators we have 36 wavetables, and it's the same wavetable. So this is your oscillator number 1, this is your oscillator number 2, and you only have have 32 types of wavetables. So I thought maybe, this is just not enough. But the Oscillator 2 has 4 extra wavetables just with simple oscillators and PWM, which is pulse width modulation, and noise. So the number 2 has 4 extra at the very end. Now then you have a different layer, which is going to be the WavMod or wavetable modifier. Now this one has 32 types, and we can grab whatever wavetable or sound source that we are selecting and then shape it on 32 different ways. And then on top of that, you have a third layer, which is going to be your OSC mod. So with the OSC mod, the third layer, what we can do, we can cross-modulate the Oscillator 1 with the 2, and we have other different variations of what we can do. And we are going to, I'm going to show them in a minute. So this means that you have your wavetable, you have 32 ways of modifying that wavetable, and then on top you have the OSC mod to modulate it or just change it on a different level. So you have like 3 ways of creating sounds, and this is great because now it's not so simple. It's not just about a few wavetables in one oscillator or maybe 2 oscillators. So you have a ton to explore right here, a lot of combinations that you can do and get different sounds. Now I'm gonna go to an init patch, hold the init, and we are starting with the init patch, and we always start with a sine wave. Now, each oscillator is capable of 36 waveforms. And right here, you have the Oscillator 1 and the 2. So this is like the main control of the oscillators, and this one is for the Oscillator number 2. That's why it says wave 1 and then wave 2. If I move this one, this is the one that's going to be sweeping your wavetable. We have the number 1, the first wavetable. So we're going to go from sine wave to a triangle to a square to a saw. Right? So those are all the different positions of the wavetable. This is how we sweep this. And this is for the Oscillator number 1, and this is for the Oscillator number 2. And of course, we can do the same thing. Now, remember that we have a lot of wavetables. How can we do to change the wavetables? Well, you are going to do it with the shift. You can press the shift and just leave it on. You can latch it. And when you move this, it's just going to take you to the different wavetables that you have available. And again, you have a lot. So you have a lot of different wavetables that you can select. And on each of them, they're going to be sounding very different. So remember that when you're shift, you're changing the bank or the wavetable type, let's say. Right. And when you are not on shift, you're going to be sweeping that wavetable. That's how it works. So you don't need to latch it to do this. Remember, you can press and hold and just move through this and select different wavetables. And when you release it, it's not gonna, latch it. So back to an initial patch, you have your mix control. You can go all the way to the 1. You're gonna be listening just to the Oscillator number 2. If I start changing the Oscillator number 2, it's gonna sound like this. But if I move towards the Oscillator number 2, since we are on an init patch, this is going to be just a sine wave. So we can, change it from saw to the square that we have right here. So this is your blend control. And if you're standing at the middle, the center, you're listening this and this, the 1 and the 2. So in terms of wavetables, the Oscillator number 1 and the 2 are completely the same. You have the same wavetables, the same banks. But if you go to the Oscillator number 2 and go of course we need to do shift, and we go all the way to the end of the list, you will have 4 different wavetables that are not on the Oscillator number 1. So you have the square noise, you have the sine noise, then the clock noise, and then you have PWM, which is pulse width modulation. All right, so I'm going to go back to an initial patch because we need to talk about how we can, use the tune and the fine tune. So both oscillators, you can change the tune. And if I play something, remember it's going to be that sound wave. Maybe I'm going to be selecting something with more harmonics, a little bit more punch, maybe something like that. All right, that's fine. So this one is going to be changing the oscillator in semitones, and you can go all the way up to 24 semitones or all the way down to 24 semitones. Pretty understandable. Now then below it says define, and everything is below and it's in this blue-gray color. It means that it's a shift function. So on this one we are going to be changing the values in cents. Right? So we can detune just a little bit. Right. So that's it. That's pretty much the oscillators at the top, the controls at the top for the oscillators. Now then you have something that says spread. Now the spread is going to do two main things. It's going to give you this unison effect. It's going to kind of duplicate this sound source and give you this unison. So if we stand right there and we start moving this, we're going to start hearing the spread. But as it goes really wide, maybe going to go up in volume just a little bit, because when you do this, the volume drops just tiny a little bit. So when you go up, you're going to get multiple copies of the oscillator that you're using. In this case, we're standing right here. And you're going to get that unison effect, right? Pretty simple. Now, as you keep moving forward, instead of getting a unison, you're going to get intervals. And this is actually a cool feature of that oscillator. Octave, fifth, and so on, and so on, and so on. Right, so what you get is the unison spread, or you get intervals. Now, on the Cobalt, which is the brother of this synthesizer, you can do spread independently on both oscillators. So you can do spread for oscillator 1 and then do a completely different spread on the oscillator number 2. On this one, you cannot. It's different. If I do spread, for example, on this one, maybe something like that, and I move to the second oscillator, and I'm going to be changing to something with more harmonics, the spread works for both oscillators. So when you do spread, you're affecting the whole sound, both oscillators, no exception. Right, so I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and I'm going to show you how this WavMod or WavMod works. So we are standing on a sine wave from the oscillator number 1, and we know this, right? So how can we access this WavMod? So I'm going to be holding the patch and move this knob, which is the wave. So this is going to give you different ways of WavMod or WavMod. So you have, again, 32 types, different types in how you can, shape or destroy it. So you have a crush, you can go down in resolution, you have it right there. And then you have a resample, and all of them are going to give you a different effect. For example, you have a dual rectify. This will just change the sound completely. Now, if I go back to nothing, so to WavMod off, it's just a sine wave, right? So I'm going to be latching right here. I'm going to show you how to do this in a minute, but for now, just going to play a key and leave it on. And if I hold the patch, I'm going to move through the different WavMods that you get. So you can affect your wavetable in 32 different ways. Alright, so resample. Some of them are going to be very mild, but then we get the dual rectifier, and you get different variations. This is just gonna change the sound in a major way, right? And again, you have a lot. So this is like the second layer that you get to generating sounds, right? Right? That's the the last one. So again, you have your wavetables, you can sweep them, and on top you have the WavMod. So let's talk about the third layer we get to affect the sound. It's going to be the OSC mod. Remember, the first one is the wavetables and the banks. We can sweep them. Then the second layer is going to be the WavMod, and then the OSC mod. Now, the OSC mod is a little bit different because we can select on the oscillator 1, different shapes and different wavetables. We can do something completely different on the oscillator 2. So we have, the same thing on the 1 and the 2. And then we have the mod, the WavMod on the oscillator number 1, but you can do something completely different on the oscillator number 2, right? So you can do it on the 1 or on the 2. Now, the oscillator mod is not like that. This is going to be a common thing that is going to be working with both oscillators, or maybe just the one. Right, so back to an initial patch, and I'm going to show you how this works. So right here, this knob is going to control how, this works. So you have your amount, how much of this effect you will be applying, and this is not the shift function. When you do this, it's going to do an amount of OSC mod. If you're all the way back to 0, you're doing nothing. Now, the thing is that you have different modes. So when you go to a shift and you maybe latch it or press and hold it, you can change the mode. And what you can do is do phase modulation. For example, the phase modulation, you're going to be using the oscillator number 2 and phase modulate the oscillator number 1. So with phase mod, what you can do, you can use the oscillator number 2, and whatever you have right here is going to phase modulate the oscillator number 1. You're doing just phase modulation. Right now we are using a sine wave on the 2 and a sine wave on the 1. So right now we are standing on phase modulation. I'm going to go off. This is how much of that effect we are going to be using. And as we go up, we get a classic phase modulation. We are using a sine wave to phase modulate this sine wave. The oscillator 2 is modulating now the 1. And just like that, you have a third layer of modulation. Now, just like the WavMod and everything else, you have a lot of different options. That's what you select when you go to mod. The first one is going to be, of course, like the one we did, phase modulation. But if you keep going up, you're going to get different ones like ring modulation, which is, ring modulation. Then you're going to get amp mod, which is, the same category. And you can think of them in categories. Like we have the ring mod and then the amp mod. And if we keep moving forward, then we have a different one, which is the sync, category. We have like the classic hard sync. And if you're thinking that maybe we are using oscillator 2, which is the slave, and then the 1 is going to be the master because we are doing sync, this is not the way it works. What it's doing, it's pretty much using the oscillator number 1 and using a copy of the oscillator number 1 to do its hard sync. This is something that we can do on the digital world, of course, not so much on the analog, but we still, we get the classic, let me get out of this, the classic sync, sound. Maybe it's going to sound a little bit better with something with more harmonics. Alright, we get the classic hard sync sound. Now if I go back to shift and we keep moving forward, we have a windowed sync, which is a variation of sync. Then if we keep moving forward, we have a shaper, just a shaper. Now we have an inverter. This is going to invert the phase. And if we keep moving forward, we have again a variation of sync, which is going to be this one. So let me go back to init. So here's the thing with this synthesizer. At first, it looks easy because you have, your wavetables and you can sweep them. But then you discover the WavMod and you can just completely change whatever whatever wavetable or sound you have right there. And then you have the third layer, which is the OSC mod. So all of this power, all of these different ways that you get, it will just make the synthesizer a little bit more complex to use. Not because it's difficult to use, it's because you have a lot of options. So you can create a lot more sounds, but then you will need to go deeper and explore it and spend a little bit more time just, playing with the different properties and maybe just trying to adjust or just trying to get a different sound. Now, and this is something very common that, happens when with the synthesizer where you have a lot of features. You're going to maybe do a patch and do something simple just with the wavetables. But if you want to go deeper, then you go to the second layer. And if you want to go deeper, then you go to the third layer. And this is the thing. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit more time. But the good thing is that you have a lot of ways to generate sounds. Now, before we can call it a day with the OSC mods, we have some other parts that we need to discuss. For example, with the OSC mod, you have the relative mode. So I'm going to be standing on an initial patch, and we have a sine wave on the 1 and a sine wave on the oscillator number 2, right? We know this. And I'm going to take you to the main app because it's a little bit more visual and easier to understand. Now, notice that right there at the bottom on the oscillator number 2, you have something that says percentage. So that one is going to be the relative mode when you tune the different oscillators. And I'm going to give you an example. So let's say that we have a sine wave right here and a sine wave right there. And I want to use the OSC mod to phase modulate the oscillator number 1 with the number 2, right? Since we are doing phase modulation with the oscillator number 2, we are using this to modulate the 1. Now, what happens when we change the tune? All right, so let me just give you an example. I'm going to go to tune of the oscillator number 2, and I'm going to move this, and I'm going to tune the oscillator number 2 1 octave up. If I play something, it doesn't sound that, that crazy. And I'm going to go all the way up on the OSC mod. But it still sounds musical. It sounds weird, like it should, but it sounds musical. Now, what happens if I detune this one? So when we offset the detunings, we are of course doing different intervals, but when I modulate the pitch of the oscillator number 1, it's going to start sounding not so musical anymore. And it's because, of course, we are doing different intervals and we have different pitch. Right, so what is the point? Why am I telling you? And I'm going to leave it at 2 because that one sounds pretty broken. So why I'm giving you this example? And it's because this is what the relative mode comes kind of to fix. What happens if this one, let's say I'm playing this and it sounds super musical and nice, and we choose an LFO or maybe an envelope to modulate the pitch of the oscillator number 1. We're going to be entering in the non-musical territory. So with the relative, what it does is going to listen to the oscillator number 1 pitch, and when we change this one will be adjusted to keep that, musical sound. Now, you don't have a knob or a button to turn it on. You can simply go to the application and just turn it on like that, for example. And now if I play it and I move, can you hear it? Now I move the pitch of the oscillator number 1, and it's going in ratios. So now it's musical and it's not so broken anymore. And I'm giving you this example, and I'm saying broken just to give an example, but what it does, again, it's just going to be adjusted, and we are using ratios. That's what we are doing behind the scenes. Right now, I'm enabling this from the application, but can we do it from within here? Yes, of course we can. Now, this is a property of the oscillator number 2, right? So if I'm standing on the 2, right, I can even go to the mix. I'm going to go maybe to the tune of the number 2 and just going to move something. And when you stand there, you can go at the top or at the bottom. And when you're standing on the oscillator number 2, if you keep moving on and just moving on, at some point, you're going to find something that says tune mode. So this is the one. Semitones is going to be the non-percentage icon that we get on the app, and then ratios is going to be that percentage. So if you're phase modulating and you want to modulate the pitch or do something like that, you're going to be moving or using LFOs all over the place. Maybe it's just a little bit better to go to ratios than standing on semitones. But again, just using it's completely up to you. The sound comes out of your head and not out of the controls. So it doesn't mean that you have to use it if you're going to be doing OSC mod, because maybe you're just not detuning it. You maybe set it to 1 interval, right? Something like that, or maybe, something like that, for example, and it sounds good to you, and you don't need to change it to ratios. You can keep it the way it is. But now you know what it does and why maybe you need to use it if you're going to be modulating the pitch. Now I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to be using a little bit more bite of the oscillator number 1. And when you do this, you have right here the spread, but you also see something that says glide. How can we change the glide? Now, this is a secondary function. You need to hold it or you need to just latch it, and this will change the glide. Now, the thing is that if you go to positives, you have the auto. This is the auto legato, the auto glide in this case. And if I go into negatives, you have a different way of glide, which is going to be the legato. Now, first I'm going to go to auto and I'm going to go really aggressive so we can hear the difference. This is just going to be glide. If you're doing 64, you're just going to be gliding. Maybe I'm going to go to higher keys. Right? So you play a key, it's going to glide to that. Now, what happens with the other ones? Now, the other one, the legato, it works for mono. And for now, I'm going to do it, and then we're going to talk about this. So right now, I'm going to go and make this synthesizer mono. So the legato means that if I play a key, notice it's just not gliding. So legato means that you need to hold the key, and then while you're holding, when you go to another key, then it's going to glide. If not, it will not do it. So those are the 2 types of legatos, or the actually glides that you get on the synthesizer. So I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and in conclusion, we just, finishing with the oscillator subject. You have a lot of different ways. Remember, playing, you're going to be changing your wave to whatever you want. If you want to change the bank to select a different waveform, you just select a different waveform, just like that. And if you want to sweep that bank, you're going to be doing again with the same knob. At the same point, you can, the same way, you can hold patch, and this one is going to give you the WavMod, and you can just shape it on a different way. And on top of that, you can use the OSC mod to shape it on a different way. And if you do a shift, you can select a different mode of OSC mod, right? So different ways of shaping and creating sounds. Now let's talk about a different thing. I'm going to go back to home and back to an init patch. So you have your main volume. It's going to be this one. Pretty simple. You go all the way down and all the way up, and it's going to, go up and down in volume. The thing is that sometimes this volume, it's not enough. And it's a pretty quiet synth, but after the 2.0 update over the firmware, they added a couple more things, and now the volume, it's not a problem anymore. So you have different gain stages on the synthesizer. You have your voice engine, and then you have the patch gain. So this is going to be the main volume. Then if you want more gain, you need to go to patch, hold it, and by moving this control, you're going to be adjusting the patch gain. Now I'm going to go all the way down, and you're going to notice the difference. If I play it and go all the volume up, it's going to sound like this. You get the volume, but then I hold patch and I go up on the patch gain, you're going to get more volume. And then right now I'm using a sine wave, so it's not super aggressive. But you can go up on the patch gain and go and get more volume. Now, behind the scenes, this has an internal limiter at the end of the chain and is right before the volume. So if you go way up on your patch gain and then maybe you distort it, or maybe you add an effects that will go up in volume, you're going to be starting to hit that limiter. So the limiter is going to be crushing the sound a little bit. Now, sometimes this is something that you might want because it will introduce artifacts and it's just going to crush the sound. So this is something desirable. But sometimes it's not. So be careful in how much up in volume you go because you're going to be crushing the limiter. Now, this is still, again, a good thing because you can go way up on the patch gain and really, hit the limiter. But then you can go down in volume because this is going to go way up in volume. And you're going to keep that crushing with the limiter, but at low volumes. Right, so we need to talk about the drift, vintage width, and the free run. So Argon, just like Cobalt, they try to sound, or they give you tools so you can sound as analog as possible. Now, first, we're going to talk about the drift. So I'm going to go back to the initial patch, and on the oscillator number 1, I'm going to be selecting something with more bite. So if I play a chord, we can hear it. So if we go all the way to right this section, it says mod. And if we read right here, it's going to say drift, width, and depth. So analog synthesizers not always are really aligned, especially with phase and tuning, right? And I mean the voices. If I play a chord, the different voices might sound a little bit different because, again, it's analog. But this synthesizer is digital, so all the voices, everything is going to be always perfect. So the drift, what we'll do, will make the voices inconsistent, tuning-wise and phase-wise. And it's going to go from mild to wild. So if I play something, I'm just playing it, try it, whatever, it doesn't matter, and I move this control, notice that the voices are drift on 0. So if I keep going up, it's going to start affecting the tuning and the phase. And if I go all the way up, and I'm making a try it right now, it's going to sound not so perfect. Let me go back to something that with more teeth. And if I go all the way down, perfect. Not so perfect anymore. Now, this is one way you get to make the synthesizer just a little bit closer to an analog synth. Now, the next line, the next level is not the drift. It's going to be the vintage mode. So for now, I'm just going to go all the way down to the drift. And how can we access the vintage? So I'm going to be holding a patch. And when I do patch and I move the mix knob, it's going to give us the vintage mode. The drift, pretty much what it will do it will just add inconsistency in terms of, the tuning and the phasing. And on Cobalt, it's a little bit more aggressive. On the modal, on the Argon, it's the drift, it's a little bit softer. But with the Vintage, when we go up in the values, we go up on this value, everything is going to be inconsistent, like the filters, the envelopes, and everything. And we can really notice this when we go up on the Vintage. I'm going to go all the way up, and I'm going to be playing just to try it. And I'm making a C minor. That doesn't sound like a C minor. Now we can hold it, we can change the value from here. If I go all the way down and I play the same thing again, it's just perfect, right? As I keep going up and keep doing the same, it's gonna start to drift. You notice that every time I play, it's gonna be a little bit different. Especially if I just tap the same chord, every time I play this, it's going to be a little bit different. But this is the main point with the Vintage. It adds inconsistencies to the different voices, and it's way more aggressive than the drift. So you don't need to go this crazy on the Vintage, because again, it's just gonna affect what you're doing. It sounds like a synthesizer that needs maintenance. Now the trick right here is to make a combination between the Vintage mode and then the drift mode. And just by doing this, you are just trying to emulate, or it's going to give you this, Vintage vibe in terms of the voices. Now I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and just like before, I will be selecting something with a little bit more bite. Let me just go to a saw. Alright, so it's all the way up on the wavetable. So analog synthesizers always have a free running oscillators. Oscillator. So when we play a key, the filters and the envelope will open and let the oscillator pass. But the thing is that the oscillator behind the scenes, within the synthesizer, is always just, running. It never stops. Now, since this is digital, it doesn't work that way. Every time we play a key, there's just going to be trigger that oscillator or that sound. Still, we have a way to emulate this free running oscillator. So if you move the mix knob just like this, if you just move it and then you go to the parameter and move one step back, it's going to take you to the oscillator menu. So by going this, you can go tapping this, you can go at the bottom. And then if you go to the other side, right here, you will find right at the end, you can find something that says free run. So now the oscillators will be on free run instead of just, when we play it, it's just going to trigger. Now they're always running in the background. Now this is just another way, another layer that we get to make the synthesizer as closer to an analog synth as possible, right? We get the drift, the Vintage, and then the free run. So I'm going to go back to an init patch. I'm going to keep that saw because I'm going to show you what the width option that you have right here is going to be. And this has nothing to do with making this more vintage or closer to an analog synth. What it will do, it will pan the voices to the left or to the right. Now, since this is ARGON8, it means that you have 8 different voices. Right now, when you start an initial patch, by default, you are doing some width. So if I do shift, and I go to this control and I move it, the default value is going to be 20. Now, I'm going to go all the way up and show you how this works. I'm going to be playing a key. It's going to sound there in the right. And then I'm going to play it again, and now on the left. So this is what the width is going to do. It's going to pan the voices to the left or to the right. Now, if you're all the way aggressive, it's going to hard pan to the right or to the left. Right. Now, sometimes, maybe if you're playing a lead, this is not a desirable thing. But this works a little bit better when you play chords. If I play a chord, it's going to sound cool. Now, of course, we maybe need a little bit of effects. Let me just do a little bit of reverb because it's just too dry. All right, so just a little bit of reverb. If I play a chord, it's going to sound pretty wide. Now, if I go back to the shift right here and go down on the width, everything is going to be on the center. All the voices are just right to the center. Sounds completely different, right? Now, you don't need to go all the way aggressive. Maybe you can do just a little bit, and instead of hard panning the voices to the left or to the right, it's going to do just a little bit to the left and just a little bit to the right. you still get your, get to make a white sound. And again, if we go all the way up, it's going to be pretty noticeable, right? You can just hear that well. If you're watching this guide from a phone, well, you're not going to notice the difference. You need to use good speakers or maybe headphones. Now, I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and when you start an init patch, the width control always, you always get something like 20 or something like that. So if you want to disable this because you don't want it, just do Shift, go all the way down, and it's off. Right, so back to an init patch. I'm going to go over there, just stand on init, and I'm going to be doing a saw because, I don't know, just a saw. So we need to talk about the filters. Now, notice all the things we already discussed, and we are not even close to finish with the whole synth. Now, you have 8 different types of filters, and they go from modern types of, classic legacy or just true to the synthesizer type of filters, and you have 4 that are classics or emulations of classic filters. Now, let's just start easy. If I play something, it doesn't matter what, I'm just making a chord. The cutoff is just gonna, of course, just chop or move the cutoff. Now, the resonance, you're gonna be adding a peak, and this depends on which filter you're using, but in this case, the resonance is just gonna do that. If I go up, Right, so all of this is just very simple, because straightforward. Now then you have the morph, and the morph will just morph whatever filter that you're using to something else. Right, if you keep going, it's going to be changing from a low pass to a high pass in this case. Now, so I'm going to go, all the way down, and no resonance. So you have 8 different types of filters, and you can group them in 2 different categories. Now, how can you change the filter? So you go to patch, you press and hold, and when you move the cutoff, it's going to take you to the different types of filters, right? All right. Now, the first group, I'm going to go all the way down on this. So we are standing on the first one. Now, the first one is going to be the standard, this one. Now, this one is going to be a 2-pole, and for now, I'm just going to play something, a 2-pole right here. To a band pass, because we're going to stand right there, do a little bit of resonance. We get a band pass right there, right? And if we keep going, it's going to go to a high pass. So this is what the standard is going to do. Now, if I go patch, hold it, and move on to the next one is going to be a standard notch. So essentially, and I'm going to play it, you get, I'm going to go all the way down in the morph, you get a 2-pole low pass. And when you move it, it's going to go to a notch. You can see the notch right there. And if you keep going, it's going to go to a high pass. This is what the standard notch is going to do. Now, if I move on, let me go all the way, back to nothing on the morph. I move on to the next filter. You have a classic, and then you have classic notch. So remember, the first one is standard, then standard notch, and then classic and classic notch. So what's the difference? Because the classic notch and the standard notch are pretty much the same as the standard. Now, the classic one is going to go from a 2-pole to a band pass to a high pass. So what's the difference, between the classic and the standard? Now, the classic, this one, of course, is a little bit darker, and it's a little bit softer on the resonance. It's not going to be that, that resonant as the standard. If I go to the other one, I'm going to hold patch and go back to the standard. But it's just a little bit different. Notice how much low end we are just losing. If I go to the classic one, we get a lot of the low end. So on this one, it means that the resonance, it's a really different, the resonance control, it's really different from the standard and the classic. Now, if I go to the notch, the classic notch is going to be the same as the standard notch. It's a 2-pole, right? It's a 2-pole, let me just stand right there. 2-pole, low pass to a notch, to a high pass. But it's the same idea. The resonance is just gonna behave on a different way. Notice how it works. Right. So this is like the main difference. And So this is the first group, right? The standard notch, the classic, and the classic notch. And then they did an update of the firmware to the 2.0, something like that, and you get more filters. Now, the next filters are a little bit different. So they are emulations, or they try to be an emulation. They try to emulate analog type of filters. So before we go through them, I need to tell you something else. If I go to, maybe, I'm going to go to the first one, right? The standard. If I play something, let me just do a chord. Right here, you have something that says distortion. So this is distortion. If I go up on this one, we get distortion. So the distortion in this case, when we play it and we go up, we can hear it's just, adding distortion. It's going to be post filter. It means that the sound goes in, we get we filtered sound, and then it goes right here to this stage, and we get, a little bit of distortion. That's fine, but it's post filter. Now, what happens with the other ones, the other group? I'm gonna go to the one that says ladder. This is the first one of the, the classic analog types of filters. Now, with classic filters, what you get is a pre-drive. So the drive is going to be pre-filter. So with analog synthesizers and classic, analog filters, you get a little bit of this drive. And right now, when you're using one of the classic filters, the distortion is not going to be post filter. It's going to be pre-filter. That's why, it's just a little bit, not that aggressive when I go up on the distortion. It's because we're using one of the classic ones. So it's like the drive of a classic analog filter. And remember, we have different types of filters. So I'm going to be playing this, and if we go up, you're going to be chopping. We do a little bit of resonance. This is a ladder filter, so when we go up, the bass part is going to go really down. Now, so the first ladder, the first one, this one, the one we are using right now, is a 4-pole. So it's a little bit more aggressive. And of course, you get your, your pre-drive. You can go all the way down, just all the way up, and then just morph it and use it that way. All right, if we go up on the drive, we are just going to get it. Pretty understandable, but it's, way aggressive because we are using 4-pole. Now, I'm going to be going all the way down in the drive and down in the resonance, and I'm going to move down, and I'm going to move on to the next filter. Now, the next filter is going to be a ladder hybrid. On this one, you get a notch, and it's a 1-pole. So it's going to be, a lot less aggressive. If I play something, we are doing a low pass, we still have the notch, and if I keep moving forward, we get the notch, and then we go to a low pass. But again, remember, it's 1-pole, so it's going to be less aggressive than the first one. Now, then the next one is going to be a ladder phaser. And as I play something and I move this, notice that it's pretty much like the other one. And then go all the way down, so we don't get a low pass on this one. This goes from a notch to a phaser, and it's what they say. Now, the trick on this one is going to be the resonance right here. You can hear it right there. Now on all of these ones, you get the the pre-drive. Notice how different it sounds with the drive and without the drive. Right. Now, so these ones are the ladder filters. Let me go all the way down to the morph and all the way down on the resonance. So these ones are the classic ladder filters. If I do patch again and I go on, just move on to the next type, this one is going to be a silent key. It's a different type of filter, and is a pretty simple one. It's going to go from a 2-pole low pass to a band pass. Remember, the resonance right here is super important. And if I go back to the low pass, the silent key sounds way different than the ladder filter. I remember that all these filters are emulations of classic types of filters. And of course, let me go to higher. The silent key, the main difference between this and the classic ladder is how the resonance works. Notice how different it sounds? Way different. Right, so in conclusion, you get your 4 different types of filters that come with Argon, and then you get the ladder and the silent key classic analog type of filters. Okay, so let's talk about cutoff scaling. Now, this synthesizer gives you 8 assignable modulation slots, and they are free to use. You can use them as you please. But then you have 4, and these ones are not part of the 8 assignable. You have 4 modulation slots predefined. Now, 2 of them are related to the cutoff. Now, the first one is going to be note to cutoff. So right here you have something that says note. Now if you wonder what this is key tracking essentially. So you have something that says note. So when you press and hold it and I move this knob, notice it says mod and then it says note and cutoff. So for now, if you're all the way to 0, you're not going to do anything, right? Now I'm going to go up on this and I'm going to show you how this is. Now, if you already know how key tracking works, it's just, that's the way it works. Now, if I'm going to be playing something, right? And we have something. Let me just go up on this one and I'm going to be adding some resonance. So if you go up on the cutoff scaling, let me go back. You go really up and you play the keys. If you play lower keys, this will adjust the cutoff a little bit less because the cutoff scaling is all the way, up. So if you play lower keys, this will affect, the key tracking will affect the filter a little bit more. But if I play higher keys, the filter is going to open a lot more. Now, if I go all the way down on this property and I play higher keys, notice that they will sound a lot darker. And I'm going to go all the way up so you can hear the difference. And I'm playing, higher keys. Notice how different it sounds. And it's because the higher notes, and it's because the higher notes are opening the filter a little bit more, and the lower ones are just not opening the filter that much. And this is something very basic for all synthesizers. It's called key tracking. Now, instead of going positives, which means that the lower keys will do less and the higher keys will do more, if you go the other way, right there at the bottom, let me just go and do it this way, you're going to be doing the opposite. The lower keys will open more, but the higher keys are going to sound really dark because they will not open the filter. So back to a default patch, and again, I'm going to go all the way up. And this is the first way of mod that you get, is the note to cutoff, right? So this is the first one. What is going to be the second one? So the second one that will affect the cutoff is going to be the aftertouch, and you have it right there. It says AFT and then T. Well, that is the aftertouch. If you don't know what aftertouch is if you play a key and then you press harder, like that, something like that, it's going to modulate something. It's going to detect that you're just pressing the key harder, and it's just going to modulate something. How can you modulate the cutoff with the aftertouch? Same way. You go here, you press and hold, and you move this, and you assign, or you decide how aggressive the aftertouch is going to modulate the cutoff. And remember, all of this are pre-assigned modulations, so you're not occupying a mod slot. So if I play a key, and now maybe let me just do some cutoff and a little bit of resonance, something like that, and I press harder, notice that it's opening. We get that sound. Now I'm gonna go up in the volume because it's just way too low. I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna apply pressure. Notice how it's modulating this. So, well, this is the aftertouch. We are going really aggressive. So it's closed, open, closed, open. Right, so we are using aftertouch to modulate the cutoff. Pretty simple. Can you go into negatives? Yes, of course you can. Hold it to go to the mod slot, and we can go the other way. So instead of just opening when we do more pressure, it's just going to close. It's just going to go the other way. So if I do it, now it's going darker. Right. Right, so let's talk about the envelopes. And now I'm going to go back to an initial patch. And I'm going to be using the oscillator number 1 and then saw. And I'm always doing the same thing, so you can do the same at your home and, have the same sound. So we need to talk about the envelopes, and it's the section right here. Now, this is just a common ADSR, and you have 3. One for the filter modulation, one for the amp, which is the volume that goes out, how you can shape the volume. And the other one is the mod AG, and this one is assignable. It is a modulation envelope, so it's an envelope that you can use to modulate something else on the synthesizer. Now, in terms of ADSR, I'm not going to explain how ADSR works. This is something very, common for all synthesizers. And if you don't know how ADSR works, you can go to the web, type how ADSR works, and you will find a million videos explaining how ADSR works. So still, I'm gonna use it right here, so we can see them at work. Now, one cool trick that you get with this synthesizer is that you have 3 envelopes, and sometimes you need to do something on the EG. So then you move this control, and so on and so on. And if you go to the amp, it's gonna say A right there. And if you go to the mod, it's gonna say M for mod, and F for filter. Now, sometimes you need to adjust the filters, and you need to do them all at once. So by holding one of them, you are gonna be moving this control. It's gonna give you a value, but this what it does is going to adjust the attack for all the envelopes, for the filter, the amp, and the mod EG. So for now, I'm going to go back all the way, back to attack nothing. So we have a very simple envelope right now. Now, then you have the depth control, and this is how much you're going to be doing of whatever envelope that you're using. Now, for now, again, you're using a saw. I'm going to do a little bit of cutoff and a little bit of resonance so we can really hear this. So we are doing something like that. So what I would love to do is to use the filter envelope to move this and do something like that. And of course, we use the ADSR. Now, the thing is that we are using the filter envelope, but we need to decide how much of the filter we want to use. Well, this is going to be the depth. If I go up on the depth, that is that this is using the envelope to control or move or modulate, in this case, the cutoff frequencies. So if I go down and I press it, it's going to sound like that. Now we can change the envelope and, of course, have the envelope modulate. We can go back on the sustain, then to the decay, add a little bit of release, and then we have just a normal filter envelope. Right? Now the depth, again, remember, it controls how aggressive the envelope is with the cutoff. Right? Pretty standard thing that we get on pretty much all synthesizers. Now on the filter EG, again, we go to positives, so this means that the modulation will move the cutoff up and then down, just following whatever information, whatever envelope you have right there. But on this one, you can go into negatives, and with some synthesizers, we can do this. And the main difference is that it will go the opposite way, right? It's just gonna modulate it backwards. So it's the same thing, but backwards. We go to negatives, and we do that. Now, then if we go to the amp EG, and for now, I'm just gonna go to filter and make sure that we are not doing a modulation. All right, so we are in no modulation land. I'm just gonna stand right there. So then the amp is going to control how the volume goes out. So if we want a slow kind of a going up in volume, we just go up on the attack. It's just gonna ramp the volume up. Then if we want to go down, we need to decide how much decay we want to use, and the volume is gonna go up at some point very slowly, and then it's gonna go down because we have a slow decay. A slow-ish decay. Now, then the sustain is going to sustain it, and then we have the release, just common ADSR. The thing is that the amp EG, again, will control how the volume goes out. So on this one, you also get a depth control. So if you go down, what you're essentially doing, you're going down in volume. Notice that is let me go back to attack nothing. Notice that it goes down. So yeah, it's less aggressive. Now we can go all the way up, it's full, which is the normal default value, or you can go down. Now this will be important in a minute. So the mod EG is a little bit different. We can map this mod EG to something else like the pitch of an oscillator, or maybe to, sweep between the different waveforms that we get in the wavetable. Now we're going to talk about this in a minute, but in terms of envelopes, it works the same as the other ones. So we already talked about the other 2 pre-assigned modulation slots, which remember is going to be the note to the cutoff, Then we have the aftertouch to the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the release to the cutoff. So this is going to be the cutoff, and then we have the rele Now we have the third modulation pre-assigned slot. Now in this one is going to be the velocity to the volume of the amp EG, the depth of the amp EG. Now, how can we, access that? Right here, you have the options. It says velo. Well, this is velocity. Now, when you hold this and then you go to the depth and you need to be standing on the amp EG, it's going to say velo and then a line, with an arrow, AEG, which is the amp amount. And we can go all the way up. I'm just going to make it really obvious so we can hear what it does. So now if I play soft, notice that we get almost no volume, super silent. Now if I play hard, it's gonna go up in volume. So what it does is going to modulate the depth control of the amp. If we play soft in terms of velocity, or soft in this case, is going to be low. It's going to be low in volume. But we play harder, velocity is going to be way up. Now this is the third pre-assigned modulation slot. The aftertouch, we get the aftertouch, the note to the cutoff, and then the velocity to the amp. Now maybe 127 is a little bit too much because if I play it soft, it's super soft, it's super low in volume. Maybe you just need to do a little bit like 30 or 50 or something like that, and that's just going to be a little bit just more normal. Right, so I'm going to go back to an initial patch, and remember we always use a saw, so we just get a saw. Now, we need to talk about the different thing, which is going to be the different curves that we get with the envelopes. And yes, we have different curves. Now, if I go to the filter EG and we are standing on there, there, I'm going to move one step down, one step back, and we are standing on the filter EG. Now, this one is going to say FEG, and then it's going to say amount. But if we go up to the bottom and we keep scrolling, we can change the values, the attack, decay, sustain, and release, and the depth from here. But if we keep going, at some point, we're going to hit the type. So the three envelopes can have different types. Now, the different types, they will give you different curves. You have the exponential, that's the default one, but you have a snap or snappy. Then you have soft, you have linear, and then you have the second category, which is going to be the same ones, but with an L, expo long, snappy long, and then soft long, and then linear long. Now, what's the difference between the long ones and the, the normal ones, the not long ones? The other ones, the long ones, are doubled in time with the, with the values. If I'm doing 500 milliseconds of the decay, well, the L is going to be times 2. It's going to be 1 second. So it's just, longer curves. Now let's just use it so we can see it, so we can hear it. I'm going to go to the filter. I'm going to do a little bit of cutoff. I'm going to do resonance so we can hear and, just hear the movements. For now, I'm just doing that. I'm going to go up on the filter modulation, right? And I'm going to go down on the attack, something like that. I'm going to do something very simple down there. So, and maybe I'm going to do a little bit of attack so we can hear, right? So pretty simple. Now, maybe I'm going to go all the way to the attack. We're going to do something like that. Right. That's a little bit better. Right. So make sure you're standing on the filter EEG, right? So by tapping it, and then go one step back, and it's going to say amount, and then we can go to the end and just select maybe a different one. We start an expo. The next one, it's going to be the snappy. What is a snappy? Now, snappy is a fast attack and a fast decay. So again, all of this just messes with the curves and the times of the different envelopes. So snappy, it's a very, let's say cool envelope to create percussive sounds, or maybe plucks, for example, because you have a fast attack and a fast decay. Right? Pretty simple. Now, if you move forward, the next one is going to be soft. So soft is a little bit different from exponential. It's a little bit, softer, not so aggressive on the curves. And as soon as you play something, you can hear the difference. Notice between expo and soft. Right, so super different. Now this one again, just a little bit more smooth, not so aggressive on the curves. Now, if I go to the linear, this one, it's not soft and it's not exponential. Everything is going to be linear, just like you see on this joint right here. Everything's super linear. So if I play it, it's going to be way different than the other ones. Let me just go back, here and do the type. Notice that they all sound a little bit different. So you need to use them, depending on the sound that you're doing. Maybe if you're doing a lush pad, maybe instead of using exponential, you can try linear or maybe soft, for example. If you're doing a pluck, maybe try snappy, right? Now, all the envelopes that you have right here, this one and this one as well, they all have this option. So you can go to the controls and then just, move right here and then change the type. Now, maybe you're asking, do I have a way to change the type by, using a combination of keys? No, you don't. You can just tap it, go to the menu, and then change the type. And now the other ones, remember, if I go back to the filter EEG and then go to the type, you have the, the expo long, which is the same thing, but the times are going to be longer. You just get longer times. It's pretty much the same. Especially when you're, for example, using creating a pad, you want something really long in terms of maybe something with very long release. Well, maybe using a long one, it's it's a good idea. Right, so let's talk a little bit more about how to use the mod EG. Now, and notice that since you're talking about modulation, we already talked about oscillators, filters, envelopes. So now we are entering slowly into the modulation world. So we will need to talk about this, about the LFOs that we get, and the mod slots, which is the modulation matrix of the synthesizer. Now, how can we use this mod EG to map it to something and do something? So I'm going to start with an initial patch so we can always all start from the same place. If I play something, we have a sine wave. What I want to do a saw. I'm going to go a little bit down in volume. So we just get a saw. So what I want to do, I want to use this mod EEG, this envelope, to, modulate something. I'm going to provide some values, do something like that. This is going to be my envelope. It doesn't matter. So how can we assign it to something? And this is going to be the way that this synthesizer will assign modulations to the modulation slots. So we are standing on the mod EG. The light is on. Whenever you tap it again, it's going to start blinking. This means that you are standing, or the mod EG is waiting for you to modulate a value so you can assign it to this modulation. Now, what I want to do, since I'm using the oscillator number 1, I want to modulate the pitch, something really obvious. So as soon as I move it, it's going to give us right here the indication, that it's going to show us what we are doing. It's saying, dude, you're using the modulation slot right now, or number 1, you're using the modulation EG, and you're using, your destination is the oscillator 1 pitch. And how much you're doing? Well, you can go up to 64. That's super aggressive. So yeah, I'm going to go really aggressive so we can notice the difference. If I play something, the mod EG now is just modulating the pitch of the oscillator number 1. Right? So that's it. And this is how you assign a mod slot. Now, we're going to talk about the mod slots in depth in a minute. This is what we did. We used one of the mod slots. We assigned the source, which is the modulation G, and the destination is going to be the oscillator 1 pitch, and then we decide how much we are doing. Notice this one is blinking, so we are still on the assign mode. So if I move something else, for example, the pitch of the oscillator number 2 is going to recognize and just change that assignment. But notice that now it changed to the modulation slot 2. So we are modulating the pitch of the 1 on the modulation slot 1, and then we are modulating the pitch of the oscillator 2 that I'm not using to the modulation slot 2, right? So we can just keep it on and keep moving things, and everything is going to be attached to the mod EG. So maybe this is not what you want. Maybe you just want to assign the modulation to the pitch of the oscillator number 1 and leave it alone, right? So how can you get out? Well, you tap it one more time, just one time, and when it stops blinking, it means that you're not on the assign mode anymore. So it doesn't matter what you move, right? It's going to get out of there. So let's talk a little bit more about the mod slots. We already know how to use a mod slot with the mod EG, but we can do a lot more. I'm going to start from an init patch, as always, and for now, I'm just going to go to oscillator number 1 and make it a saw, right? Pretty cool. We already know how to do this. Now, if we go to the menu right here, going to go 1 down, and it's going to stand you on the oscillator. Maybe we can go to patch, let's say. And right here from the menu, if I start scrolling and moving and moving and moving and moving, it's going to say mod slot. So we have the 1, the 2, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. And then remember the pre-assigned mod slots. We have the node to cutoff that we already know. Then the joystick. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But then if we go down right here, we have the other, types of pre-assigned mod slots. But this is not what we are going to be talking right now. Now, if I go back to the modulation slot right number 1, it says that this one is empty. So we can attach a modulation or whatever modulation to whatever other param from here. Now, we already did it with the mod EG. Now, let's say that I want to go maybe right here at the bottom. Remember, we have a saw on the oscillator number 1. We can turn it off or turn it back on if we wanted to. But if I move right here, it's going to say source and then destination. Now, remember, we need a source to do a modulation. So with this knob, you're going to be selecting whatever source is going to be doing whatever modulation. And you have velocity, you have notes, expression, aftertouch. You can use the joystick. We're going to talk about that. So I'm going to use the LFO one. We are going to talk about the LFO. So once you select the source, you need to confirm. So once you tap it, it's going to select, and that is the new source, just like we did with the MEG. Now, if I move, over there, if I move, now we need to select the destination, and you have a lot of different destinations. So let's say that I want, again, to do the oscillator 1 pitch. Once you're ready, you push, and it's going to confirm, and you move on to the next one, and it's going to say how much you want to do. So if I play a key and go up, this is going to modulate the pitch. It's that simple. Now, if I keep moving forward, you can clear. So if you want to remove whatever you did on this modulation slot, you just push and it's going to clear that slot. So back to patch and just back home. And now we know how to enter the mod slots. But the main idea of the synthesizer, all the LFOs and the MEG and all the buttons that you get right there is that you don't need or you don't have to go to the menu to assign a modulation. You can do it from the main panel. And we already did this. For example, when we are doing the aftertouch, to the cutoff and the note to the cutoff, well, this is the same thing. The only difference is that we don't do it to the cutoff. If I wanted to use, for example, aftertouch, right? I'm going to do aftertouch. And this is blinking. This means it's on the assign mode. So it's awaiting for me, just blinking and move. It's awaiting for me to move something. Now, remember, we have that saw again. I'm going to be doing a tune and it's, going to recognize it. It's going to say the aftertouch. It's modulating the pitch by this much, which is I'm going to be going really aggressive, maybe a little bit less. And now if I play it and I do aftertouch, and I'm going to show you right there. There you go. You have a modulation slot ready. It's just press. It's going to enter to assign. You decide which thing you want to modulate. You decide how much, and that's it. That's how you create modulations. Now, let's do a couple more. I'm going to remove whatever you have right there. Let's say that I want to go to the velocity. The velocity of the keys is going to modulate something. So I'm going to tap it. It's going to start blinking. And then maybe let's say I want to modulate the wave. So every time that we use it, depending on how hard we hit the keys, in terms of velocity, this is going to, modulate the waveform. Now, right now, I'm on the last position, which is the saw. I'm going to tap it to get out of the assign mode. I'm going to go back to assign wave. Now, when I play it, and I play harder, now it's going to, towards the saw. But if I play soft, it stays almost on the sine wave. If I play it hard, right? So we are assigning a modulation from velocity to the wave. The thing is that sometimes you want to access the menu to see all the different modulations that you're doing. How can you access? Well, one way is by going to patch, then going all the way up and scroll, more scrolling until you get to the mod slots. And then right here, you just can delete them, change the source or the destination and the depth and everything else, and you can do it from here. Now, we have a better way. If you go to this control, this section, you press and hold velo and then go right there and just press it. It's going to directly take you to the mod slots. Why? Well, notice that right here it says mod slot. So this is a shortcut, right? So wherever you are, if you do hold velo and then tap the expression or mod slot, it's going to take you directly to the mod slots, so you don't need to scroll. Now, in terms of modulation, you can do a million things. You can use the LFO1, LFO2. We need to talk about that. You can use the joystick to modulate whatever you want. That's why you have right there the names of the XY controller. So whenever you're in shift, for example, let's say I want to add a modulation. When I do XY plus, let's say, I'm going to tap it. It's going to enter the assign mode, and then I don't know, I'm going to be moving the cutoff. So now the cutoff is going to be modulated when we do that. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go, let me go out. I'm going to maybe go to a different waveform and do some cutoff like that. Now, if I play something, this one is going to be modulating the cutoff. So you have a lot of sources, the envelope, LFOs, the XY, velocity after touch. You can even do note. You can even you even have an expression, so you can connect an expression pedal, and with that pedal, then you can control whatever modulation. Now, since we are talking about the XY, let's just cover this and then move on to the LFOs. I'm gonna start from an initial patch as always and use a saw. So if I play something, it's just gonna be like that. By default, the XY controller, if you move on the X-axis, which is gonna be like that, is going to control the pitch. You can go down or you can go up. And by default, if you go up, it does nothing. And if you go down, it does nothing. Right? So pretty simple. Now, remember, you can access to these controls and map it to a modulation slot and do something just like we just did. And remember, you need to do a shift because these are shift, accessible controls. We already did it, but, let's, do it again. Let's say I want to do X plus and I want to do cutoff. We are going to be doing cutoff by this. By this much, let's say, and when you're done, you exit. Let's say that we want to do XY. So when we go down on the Y, we are going to be going down on the cutoff. So I'm going to be doing the same. Enter the assign mode, and we go into negatives, and then we are done. We get out, and that's it. Now I'm going to be doing something to the cutoff because right now it's just you're doing nothing, something like that. Now if I play it, we have that. We go up, and we go up on the filter, and if we go down, we go down on the filter. Now, notice that as soon as I move, it really goes down. So maybe we want to change the values or the depth for the X minus, the Y minus. Now you can still go right there and enter the assign mode. And when you go down, it knows that you already assigned this to a param. You're already modulating this. So it's going to take you to that mod slot so you can maybe change the depth. You don't need to do velo and then, mod slot and go to the menu and modulate it manually. If you already did it, it's going to take you to that mod slot. And instead of doing something really aggressive, I'm going to do something less, just a little bit less. And now we have a smoother transition. Right. So this is one of the most useful modulation sources that you get on this synthesizer. Now notice at the bottom, and I'm going to get out of the assign mode for now, and I'm going to get out of the shift mode. At the bottom, it says XY lock, and then it says sustain. So we need to talk about this. So right now we are doing something with the with the XY controller. We go up, and I'm going to go, a little bit up on that one. We go up or down, or we can go like that. So the X lock, what we'll do, it will lock the XY. So how can we activate all of this? Whenever you're not standing on shift, is going to be the first line of params, velocity, after touch, note, and expression. If you do shift, you're going to be entering the X plus, minus, Y plus, and then minus. How can you access the third line of params? So this one is going to be the velo. That is that you have a circle on the velo. So it means that by holding this, you can access the X lock, sustain, or mod slot. So if I do this, what I'm doing, I'm locking, and it says right there, XY lock, and we turn it on. So if I play it and I move, I'm getting nothing. But you need to hold the velo and then just to access the third line of params. And if I tap it, we are back to XY lock on, or off in this case, sorry. Now, if you think about it, when we go to the mod slots, that's what we are doing. We are accessing the third option. So hold, and then right there, and we are going to the mod slots. Now, you have a different feature, and for now, I'm just going to go back to patch. It's going to be the sustain, right? It says sustain right there. So what happens if we go to sustain? So I'm going to tap it, hold the velo, and then access the third param, which is going to be sustain. So you're going to have a light on. Now, when I play a key, it's going to sustain it. That's why it's called sustain. It's like a latch. It's a latch, and really it's just a latch. I play a key, and it's just going to remember and just keep playing it. Now, on this mode, if I play another key, it's going to play both keys. So everything that you play is going to remember and then hold it. Now, remember you have 8 voices, so you can do up to 8. Right? All right. Now, this is and to deactivate it, you can just tap it. Oh, sorry for that. You can do go velo, hold it, velo, and then tap it, and it's just going to go away. So this is very cool. If you do a chord and you want to sustain it, and you're going to release it, and the chord still plays, and you can make adjustments to your sound, something like that, right? Let's say that we want to use maybe a different bank or different waveform. You can totally do it and just fine-tune your sound, right? So pretty simple. Again, to get out, you can go out. Now, the downside of this, and I'm going to enable it again, is that every time that you play a key, it's going to remember. So if I go out and go back in, I make a chord, and then I go and make a different chord, maybe a triad. Instead of forgetting about this and just playing this chord, it's going to play both. Now, it would be wonderful that if we maybe play something, and then play something new, it's going to forget whatever we did and then do the new thing. Now, we can do that, and we need to do velo and then hold, and instead of having a steady light, it's going to blink. So it means that maybe I'm going to be going right there, make a chord, you have that chord, I'm going to maybe adjust the cutoff, and now I'm going to play a lower chord. Notice that it's playing whatever I did right here, and it's just forgetting whatever we did right here. The same thing is going to happen if I play a key. If I play one key, it's just going to play that one, and if I play a new key, it's going to play this one. And if you want multiple keys, remember you need to play them at the same time. Maybe like that, right? So that's the difference between the two modes. Okay, so let's talk about the LFOs. Now, you get 2 LFOs, you get 1, and you get 2. Now, the first one, this one, it's global, and the number 2 is polyphonic. Now, if you don't know what that means, don't worry. I'm going to give you an example in a minute. First, let's learn how they work. These are just LFOs, and you can control the rate of the LFO and how much of the LFO you're doing in terms of depth. And then with the shift, when you enter the shift mode, you can change the shape of the LFO, which is going to be the shape, and then the mode. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Now, the first question is, how can we use them? Well, we use them through the mod slots that we already discussed. Just like when we use the velocity, the aftertouch, the mod EG, the envelope, or the XY controllers, we need to tap it, assign it to something, and then the LFO will just take over. Alright, so I'm going to be using the LFO and just do something. Remember, always starting from a default patch, right? I'm going to go to a saw, something simple that we can recognize, and I'm going to be going to the LFO number 1. I'm going to tap it, and it's going to enter to the assign mode. So now we need to decide what we want to modulate. So I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be doing the cutoff, something like that. And I'm going to be modulating the cutoff up in value, right? And when we are done, I'm going to be doing, and of course we can go all the way aggressive if we wanted to, but I'm just going to stay around 30s. I'm going to tap it to get out. Now I'm going to maybe go right there, do a little bit of resonance, and now the LFO is just going to, it's just going to modulate the cutoff up and down. It's that simple. Now notice that the LFO it's pretty slow. It's just pretty slow. Now, right here we have the controls. We can go up in rate. It's just going to go faster. And as you keep going up, it's going to go in different values. Super fast. And then at some point, you're going to go and enter into intervals. Right, so super fast. Right, all the way up, 127. We go super fast. Now, if we go to the other side, negative, below 0 is going to enter into divisions, subdivisions. We keep going down. Just, we are using subdivisions. Now, the thing is that when you use divisions or subdivisions, you're going to be syncing or using this on a tempo, based on tempo. Now, the camera cannot pick it up. It's all the way on the other side. The last knob that you have right here is going to say tempo. If you take a look on your synthesizer, it's going to say tempo. Now, if you move that knob right here, you can decide the tempo if you're not syncing the synthesizer to maybe some other device. Right? If you're doing that, of course, the other device is going to be the master, so that's going to be the tempo. But if you're not doing that, moving the tempo knob is going to decide, the BPM. So the divisions are going to be based on this tempo. If I play it and change the tempo, notice that it's going to change how the rate works. But that's it, You can use divisions or just go into normal hertz, let's say. Right? So then, remember that you have the depth. Maybe it's just a little bit too aggressive, what we did when we assigned it. So I can go all the way up in depth, which is really aggressive, or I just can go down and smooth the LFO, right? Just go down and smooth it. Go all the way back to nothing, or just do a little bit. Now, we can go into negatives as well. Alright. Super simple. I'm gonna stay around there. Now, then we have the shift options, which is gonna be the shape and the mode. We're gonna talk about the mode in a minute. The shape is going to be the shape. By default, it's a sine wave, but if we move to the other side, it's gonna transform into a triangle, a saw, then it's gonna go to a square, and then it's gonna start to enter into the random, world. Right? Super simple, right? Random, square, you get just, the common waveforms. Right. Now we need to talk about the mode. So with the mode, you get 3 different types. Is the retrigger, the free, and the single. Okay. So let me just maybe go to something a little bit slower. Something like that. Right. And I'm going to enter the shift and I'm going to move this knob, which is the mode. By default, the mode is retrigger. So it means that every time I play a key, it's going to re-trigger the LFO, so the LFO always starts from the same place. Right? Notice that I'm playing the key and it always sounds the same. Now, on analog synthesizers, and on digital as well, but it's just more common analog synthesizers. The LFO is just, a frequency that it's in the background, just like the oscillators, and it's just constantly just running. It never stops. So when you go to the mode, you can change it to the other mode, which is going to be free. And free means that it's constant. It will never retrigger. So now, if I play a key, it doesn't matter. I'm playing a key. It will not retrigger. Sometimes it's going to start, up or down. Now, and this is a little bit more obvious if we go to maybe a square type of, LFO, something like that. Every time I play it, when I tap it, sometimes the cutoff is up, and sometimes it's just down. Let me go up in volume. Notice that it's inconsistent when I tap it. But if I go to the other mode, which is going to be the retrigger, since every time that I play it, it's going to retrigger the LFO, it's super consistent. It always starts on the same place, but when I hold it, then it goes through the modulation. Right, so pretty understandable. We are still in shift, and I'm going to go to the mode, So we have retrigger, free, and the next one is going to be single. So single, it means single shot. And this is, again, just a very common, type of option or param that we get with LFOs on any other synthesizers. One shot, it means that the LFO will execute one time, going to go one cycle. So if I play it, it's going to do the modulation and then go back to 0. No modulation, right? It's just executing the same thing once. It doesn't matter I'm holding, it doesn't matter how many times I'm playing the key, it's just going to execute it one time, one shot. That's why it's called single. And then you don't have more options. So I'm going to go to shift and I'm going to do init, and we're going to talk about the LFO number 2. So the LFO number 2, it's essentially the same idea. I'm going to be assigning it to the cutoff, and I'm going to be doing something. We already did this, of course. I'm going to get out of the assign mode, maybe going to go to a saw and do some cutoff. I'm going to go up, and it's just, again, just same idea. We go up and rate. We can do divisions, exactly the same thing. We can decide how aggressive this is just going to sound. If we go to shift, we have the different shapes, and we go through the same shapes, right? Exactly the same. Now, the main difference between the 1 and the 2 is that the 1 is global and the 2 is polyphonic. So again, back to an initial patch, and I'm going to be doing something like that, something maybe not so aggressive, like a saw or square. I'm going to stand on the, sine wave land. So when I play a key, we are going to be getting something like this. And right now, I'm going to be showing you a spectrum, so you're going to see it right there at the bottom. So when I play a key, we can see the harmonics and how it goes. Now, I'm going to be going to LFO number 1. I'm going to be tapping it and assigning the pitch of the oscillator number 1. And I'm going to be going really aggressive, right? Just to show you how it works. Now, when I play a key, if you see it on the spectrums, the pitch is going to go up and down, because that's what we are doing. I'm going to get out of the assign mode. I'm going to go this right there. And I'm going to maybe go up in rate so we can really see what it's doing. It's going up and down, right? So the mean of the global LFO1, it means that if I play a key, and I'm going to play one key so you can see it right there, I'm going to play it. I'm going to play a higher key. Maybe I'm going to go right there to a higher octave, right there. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to play a key, and it goes up and down. We already know this. Now, if I play a new key, this one, right, I'm going to play this one. Both voices, this and this, I'm gonna do the same thing, and you can see it on the spectrum. They're moving the same way. If I play a third key, I'm gonna be playing maybe this one. The 3 voices are moving the same way, and if I play a fourth one, this one, all voices are just grooving with the same LFO, and it's because they're using the same LFO. So this means that the LFO1 is global. I'm playing and using multiple voices, but all the voices are using the LFO1 as an instruction. Right. I'm going to release this, and I'm going to do the same thing. Now, instead of using the LFO, I'm going to go all the way down in depth. I don't want anything, so if I play a key, you have no modulation. I'm going to do the same thing with the LFO2, but it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to just tap it to enter the assign mode, and I'm going to be modulating the pitch of the oscillator number 1 by something like that. And I'm going to tap to get out of this, and I'm going to maybe go up in rate, and if I play it, maybe that's just too much. I'm going to go around there, right? Depth all the way up, just going to go there so we can see it, right? So now, if we do the same thing, I'm going to press a key. That's one voice because we are pressing one key. If I play a second key, there's a tiny disconnection between the movement. And if I play a fourth key, notice it, just look at the spectrum. So we are pressing 3 keys, and they move in almost, or one of the notes moves on in opposite directions. If I play a fourth key, it's just gonna move differently. And if I play a fifth, they all just move on a different way. So this, and I'm playing 5 keys, so it's 5 voices. So this is why the LFO2 is polyphonic. Each voice, it will listen to its own LFO. I'm going to go higher in pitch. Each voice will use its own version of the LFO. So this one is using one version of the LFO. If I press a new key, this one will start in a different point in time with the LFO. Maybe it's going to be on the downside or maybe on the up. So it doesn't matter. This voice is going to use a different version of the LFO. So each voice will use its own version. That's why you are going to get something like this, which is something that you don't get with the LFO 1 because it's global. Right, so this is what a polyphonic LFO means, and the LFO 2 is polyphonic and the 1 is global. Right, so I'm going to go back to the LFO 2 and I'm going to make the depth to nothing, right? So if I play something, nothing happens, but we know that on the LFO 1, we have the depth all the way down and we are doing some modulation. Now, I'm going to go to depth of 0. Now, we already know that we can use the node to cutoff to use one of the predefined mod slots. We can use the aftertouch to cutoff to use, again, one of the predefined mod slots. And then we have the velocity to the amp, right? We already know this. We talked about this. So we have a fourth one. And the fourth one is going to be about the LFOs and the XY controller. Now, remember, we can do this and we can do this to access the mod slots. And if I keep moving forward, we will find the default mod slots. We have the node to cutoff. We already know this one. And then we have the X plus to LFO 1 depth. So if you wanted to assign the XY controller to modulate the depth of the LFO, you don't need to use a mod slot, one of the assignable mod slots, because you have a predefined mod slot for this. So I'm going to go all the way up on the depth of this one. So now when I go up on the XY controller, the depth of the LFO will go up. Remember, this one is on 0. So you have a predefined mod slot, for factory or just wired behind the scenes. So you don't have to assign it and use a free mod slot, right? And these are the 4 different mod slots that you get, pre-assigned mod slots. The aftertouch to cutoff, velocity, and, then the XY to LFO depth, and then the node to cutoff. Right, so let's talk about the effects that we have available. So you have 3 different slots, FX1, FX2, and FX3. You have a lot of different effects. I will not go through all the different effects because it would be like going through all the different wavetables and it makes no sense. I'm just going to show you how they work and how you can use them. But remember, again, you have 3 slots. You can assign an effects to each of the slots, but there's a catch. With the update, with the firmware 2.0, they added a few different effects. But the thing is that they use a lot of more DSP power, processing power. So these are the plus types of, effects. So I'm going to stand on the number 3. And right here, when maybe you stand on 1, it's going to give you none. With this control, you can just, toggle through them and you have version 1, which is the phaser. And then the V2 are the version 2 firmware. And if I keep going up, at some point, you're going to find one or a couple ones that says plus. So the plus will occupy 2 slots. So instead of using 3 effects, you can use just 2 if you're utilizing a plus type of effect on one of the slots. So let's say if you want to use a chorus on the number 2, I can use a chorus, but I cannot do anything on the number 1 because we have the V2, the reverb plus on the 3rd one. So when you go to the different slots right there, when you tap them, notice that it's just toggling you. It's just taking you through the different types that you have available. So this is another way of selecting the different effects instead of just going here and just selecting this. So I'm gonna go to a reverb, something that we can really notice. And I'm gonna go to the V2. So I'm gonna select it. And since we are starting on initial patch, I'm gonna do something with more harmonics, something like that maybe. And as soon as I play it, we notice the reverb. Right. So on each of the effects, not on all the effects, you have 3 params available, but you have 6 because you can enter to shift mode and access the other 3. For example, in this case, we are standing on the reverb. The first option is going to be the dry and the wet, right? You can go down on the dry and the wet or go all the way wet. The second one is going to be the time, which is going to be the decay, pretty much. Then the third one right here is going to be the brightness. Just going to, make it brighter or not. And now if we want to access the other params, we need to do a shift. And then when I enter, then it's a high pass, then modulated part of the reverb, and then we have a pre-delay. Now, all the different effects will have different properties because they are different effects. And some of the effects will not have options for the second row of params. That's it in terms of effects. You just select the effects, you adjust your values, maybe right there, you're going to be using, I don't know, whatever, reverb, something like that. I'm going to go down on the cutoff, maybe a little bit up on the resonance, something like that. And let's say I want to add something before, so I'm going to go to the effects number 2. I'm going to select it. Maybe we can do, I don't know, a ping pong delay. I'm going to press or push to confirm. And now the number 2 is going to be a delay. So we can go up on the dry and wet. Then we can go up on time. And remember, if we go down, just like the LFOs, we enter into the divisions. And then the feedback. Now, I'm going to be standing on maybe the number 2. Now, there are a few things that you really need to know to make your life a little bit easier when you work with effects. So when I'm standing right here and I press it and hold it, it's going to, kaboom, it's going to delete it. So now the delay is no more. And if I go to this one and press and hold, it's going to delete the reverb. Now, the next thing is going to be that you can store whatever you do right here on a preset, right? So you have the effects chain and you can save it. And also you can load presets, effects presets, of course, from other, other patches, or maybe one preset that you used earlier. Now you can store up to 100. So since you can load 500 presets, you cannot store 500 presets of just effects. You can only do 100. How can you access that menu? So right now, we are not doing effects at all. So if we go and press the three effects at the same time, I'm going to be pressing the 3. It's going to take me to the menu of the loading effects. And this one works just like selecting patches. So if I go at the top, maybe I can use this one. And of course, we need to go there and load the effects. So now we are using the presets 0 of effects. And we get just a basic course, just like it says right there at the top. But I can maybe go, I made a mistake right there. I can maybe go to a different one, maybe a different preset. Let me just do this one. Is course, delay, and reverb. Okay, so I want that one. I'm going to go down and just load the effects. And now we have the chain and we don't need to create it. So you can use presets, which is something that, makes you save a lot of time. Now, what happens if you want to store your own chain? Well, once you create your chain right here, you access this menu again by pressing the 3 buttons at the same time. And when you go at the bottom, instead of loading, is going to, and I made a mistake right there, just gonna go back. Right there, if you change it, let me go to all the way up. So you, when you get the 100 presets, let me show you there, 900. You have a preset for everything. So if you store your own, you're going to be deleting one of the pre-existing effects. Now, right here, the load effects, when you change this with this knob, you're going to be either loading or you're going to be saving. So if you want to save your effects or your chain, once you press it, it's going to, tell you, okay, so where you want to save it and then what's the name. And then you just, save it and you can reuse it much later. Now I'm going to go back to patch and I want to show you something else. I'm going to be maybe going to this effect and I'm going to kaboom, delete it. I'm going to go to this one, kaboom, delete it, and just, deleting all the effects chain. So we have nothing. And if I play something, we have nothing, right? So and this is one of the most useful functions of the effects section. Now let's say that you add. I'm going to go to the third, and I don't know, let's say that you add a course, right? Something that changes the whole thing, right? That's the course. And then you decide, you know what? I want to use a reverb after the course. Oh man, so I'm gonna need to delete this one and redo the same thing I did with the chorus, but maybe, I don't know, on the number 2. So you don't need to do this. So when you go to the effects and you can access it, through the menu, when you go right there at the bottom and you keep moving, notice that you get the different values that you can select right here in this case. I'm going to go maybe to the chorus, sorry. I go to the bottom. It says that I have a chorus. You can change the dry and the wet, the mod depth, and everything else that we are doing with these knobs. But then if we keep going, it's going to say swap width. So if we are standing on the effects number 3, we're going to swap it with the effects number 1. So I'm going to be doing something like that. Maybe just take it to the effects number 1. Once I confirm this, now the number 3 has nothing, but the 1 has the chorus. So yeah, we can just move the different effects on, to different places. And if you have something else on the number 3, let's say I do a phaser, a flanger, something like that. I'm going to be standing on the number 1. Okay, so I'm going to go down on the bottom. I'm going to go move to the last one. And now I'm going to be swapping it with the 3, and it will tell you what you're using on the number 3. And if I confirm this, it's going to swap the chorus for the flanger. And I'm going to do it. And once it's done, right now the 1 is the flanger and the 3rd one is the chorus. And this is a very useful thing because sometimes you're creating, chains. You make mistakes and maybe you want to change it from to a different slot, and just you need to do it again. Well, this is the way of doing this. Okay, so let's talk about the voices. I'm gonna be going back to home and start with an initial patch. So right here you have the different voices. Now some of the options you have right there, and I'm gonna go maybe to a saw, something like that, and maybe do a little bit of resonance, something like that. Right here you can go octave up, just like that, and then go down and in octaves, right? Just pretty simple. Now then you have the chord mode. We're going to talk about this in a minute. First, I would love to talk about the options that you have below: mono, poly, unison, and stack. So if I do shift and I go right there, notice that poly is selected. You have the blue light. So this means that by default, this is a polyphonic instrument. You can do up to 8 voices. That's why it's ARGON8. Now, if I select this one, now this one is going to be a mono. So I can play one single key at a time. It doesn't care if I play more keys. It's just not gonna do it. It's just a mono synthesizer. It's a mono synth. Right, so pretty simple, understandable. Now let's talk about the other ones, which is going to be the unison and the stack. And on this ones, we need to do a little bit more explaining. When you select the unison, and I'm going to stay latched, when you select the unison, right here at the bottom, it's going to ask you, okay, so what do you want to do? Unison 2, unison 4, or unison 8? So since you have 8 voices, and you're using unison, what this will do, it will stack all the different voices available on the synthesizer, or 8, or 4, or 2, and it's going to stack them on top of each other. This is how unison works. Now, if I play a key, and I'm going to go up in, the cutoff, notice how it sounds, right? I'm going to maybe go there and do unison 4. It doesn't sound like unison, right? So the unison sound, and if I go back to maybe mono or maybe poly, why not? The unison sound comes from, for example, the spread. If I play something and I go up on the spread, that's the unison sound. And this is what it does, right? It's just creating that unison vibe of creating multiple copies of the oscillator and then stacking them, and it gets detuned, so we get the big sound. Right? That's the plan. So what's the point of having unison right here? Now this works in a different way. You're going to be stacking voices. Now the thing is that all the voices are going to be on the same place. So you don't get a wider sound. You don't get the control for the spread. It's just going to be a little bit louder. Now I'm going to go down on the spread on this one, and I'm going to go back to the unison. And I'm explaining this because it's a little bit weird how it works right here and how it works on other synthesizers. On other synthesizers, when you do unison, you do have a dedicated control to do the spread. On this one, you don't. Now, if I play a key, it's going to sound like this. How can we create a spread type of unison, right? How can we spread the voices? So we're going to be doing it with the drift and the vintage. Remember what they do? They will just add tiny little changes and imperfections to the tuning, the phase, and everything else, and that will just, cooperate to create that unison vibe. Still, it's not going to go crazy. So if I play a key and go, I'm going to go down in volume, of course, and I go up on the voice drift, we get that unison vibe. The drift is going to be this first thing that will help you to get that unison with the unison voice. Now, the next thing is going to be enabling the vintage mode, and this is just going to help. But still, when we play it, notice that it sounds a little bit too harsh at the beginning. We have a big transient at the beginning, like a peak. Well, this is in part because it is digital, of course, and you don't have the free running enabled. So how can, again, go to the free running? Well, remember, we can go to the mix if you want to, and then go there, and we are standing on the oscillators. So if you go to the last option, it's going to be free run. And when we are enabled, when this is on, both oscillators are free running. So now we get a smoother unison when we play it, right? Now, if I go back to the unison right here, you can do up to 8 voices, you can do 4 voices, and then 2. Now, if you're wondering, can you, let me go back to unison. If you're wondering, can we play, multiple keys and then, get that unison vibe? Well, no, this is just a mono option. If I play one key, it's gonna be one, just two voices on the same key. If I play a new key, it's just disposing this one. So it's gonna make it mono, right? And when I mean mono, is just one single key at a time. Same thing with the other voices, just the same. Right. If you want to do something like that, press many keys and have multiple voices assigned to those keys, that's going to be the stack. So if I go and enable the stack, we get the same options 2 and then 4 and nothing else because we only have 8 voices. And then you can do this. If we do 2 voices and this is an 8 voice, synthesizer, we can do 2 notes or 2 voices per key. I'm going to be playing 1, we get a 2, we get a 3, and we get a 4th, right? So we can play up to 4 keys, not more. Now, if we do 4 voices, a stack of 4, we can just do 1 key and a 2nd key, and we cannot make a 3rd one because we are already stacking in 4, so we do 8. Well, 4 plus 4 is 8. We are done, we don't have more voices, right? So on top of the stack, it says chord. Can you make chords with this? Yeah, that's the plan. So how it works is that you need to make a chord, and remember you're on poly, you make a chord, I'm just playing a triad, it doesn't matter, and then you just go right there and press the chord. Now this is gonna toggle the chord latch on. I'm gonna release the keys, right? So I was making a minor C. So now when the chord is on and we were holding when we turn this on, now when we play 1 key, it's gonna be playing that chord that we did, and it's just going to transpose it, of course, to different keys if we play different keys. It's a dumb transpose, but that's fine. Right. Now the transpose that you see right there, it's more for the ARP and the sequencer. So remember, on this one, I will not cover the sequencer and the ARP. I'm going to be doing it on a different video. Right, so I'm going to start with an initial patch, we already know, and I'm going to be going to something, a little bit more noticeable. Now, I'm going to show you one more thing before we go to, we pretty much finish with everything. You have global control for the velocity, the X, Y, the aftertouch, and, the note and the expressions. So if I do something like, I don't know, aftertouch, something like that, and I move right here the pitch, when I do aftertouch, I'm going up in pitch. Now, if I go really aggressive, this one is going to go really aggressive. Now, notice that right here you have something that says depth. So this is going to control the depth of the aftertouch, velocity, the notes, and the expression. So by default, they are just all the way to 100, right? They are super aggressive. But by tapping and holding and moving this, now this is taking you to something that says voice and then aftertouch depth, because I'm, holding the aftertouch. Made a mistake right there, but I'm going to tap it and then go this. And instead of, getting out, let me just go out, tap it again. I'm going to move the depth. I'm going to be going, way down. So now the aftertouch is not going to be so aggressive. Now this is very mild now. So you can control, let me get out, you can control the velocity, aftertouch, notes, and everything else, how aggressive it is in, the XY controller too. So if you go to patch, back to the, back to home, the next option is going to be voice. So if you go down right here, you have all the options. So you can set it from here. So you have the velo sign, that other one, but you have the velocity depth, you have the aftertouch sign, then aftertouch depth, and all of that. You can set it from here. Now, if you're using the Modal app, let me just show you the app right now. So right here at the bottom on the application, notice it says depth. So you can change it from here directly if you're using the app. And notice that you get velocity, aftertouch, note, expression, and you can even smooth or take the X plus, for example, to the negative side. And you can do it from here, but you can do it from the app. Sometimes using the app is just great. All right, so let's talk about the last thing we're going to be covering on this guide is the favorite and recall slots. So yeah, you can save favorites. You cannot save a lot of favorites. So you can only store up to 8, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Yeah, you can store up to 8. Now, first, I'm going to show you how to load them, but because by default, from factory, you already have 8 loaded. So you need to go to patch and press and hold. Now, this is going to kind of take you to the favorites, land. So when I press the number 1, it's going to take you to the patch number 1. That's the favorite. It's going to take it to the number 2. That's the favorite 2, favorite 3, and so on and so on and so on until you get your 8 favorites. If I go back to, maybe if I go to a different patch, let me just go here. I'm going to go and load, I don't know, the 64, right? Let's say that I love that patch and I want that patch on the recall favorite in the position number 1. All right, let's say that you want that. So I'm going to be holding this one. And now, instead of just tapping one time, I'm going to be pressing and hold. And once you do that, it's going to assign whatever patch that you had loaded to this favorite. So now if I maybe go to a different patch and load that one, if I want to recover, I hold the patch and I just tap it. And it's just going to take me back to that sound. Alright, so hopefully you liked all of this. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, just to say thanks, you can go to the links in the description, and you have links for PayPal, you have YouTube thanks, and you have Patreon. So maybe you can be a 1-month patron and just, maybe buy me a coffee that way. Right, so thanks for watching and see you on the next one.